Okay, so continuing in Ani Ladodi V'Dodi Li, in the Rebbe's Mimer from Tafshin Lamed Beis. We said yesterday that a couple questions in the Mimer. One, we said is a famous question, why in the Alter Rebbe's Mimers it says Ani Ladodi V'Dodi Li is Rosh Hashanah Elul, and then he goes and explains that Ani Ladodi is what happens in Elul, and V'Dodi Li is what happens in Rosh Hashanah. So why is all of those four letters collected in the word in the word Elul itself? It sounds like V'Dodi Li is also connected with Elul. That was the first question. We kind of leave that on the side. But the second question, he starts to explain that in the mashal of the king in the field, it sounds like the main thrust of the avodah of Elul is an avodah of love. Because when we go out to the field, the king happily accepts everyone. It's kind of this like feeling of elation that no matter who you are, the king's going to look at you and show you a happy face and smiling, happy, laughing face. So it sounds like it's a good time for everybody. But then, so how does that fit with what it says in the Torah, in Halacha, that you're supposed to blow the shofar all the days of the month of Elul in order to instill fear? So it sounds all of a sudden like the avodah is fear, not love. So then we said that basically, since the avodah of Elul is essentially the avodah from below to above, love basically is something which you experience from above to below. But fear is something that you place on yourself. As we said, that Som Tasim Alecha Melech, which is today's not Yom Yom, it's in today's Torah portion. Right? You shall place upon yourself a king is a commandment for you to place on yourself a king. It's something that you have to do to yourself. It's not like something that the king comes to you and tells you he's the king. And therefore the fear that you have of a king, we said, is based on the fact that you made him into your king. And the proof was, as we said yesterday, that someone else's king doesn't necessarily instill fear in you. So we said that we also see this, of course, in the mashal of the Alter Rebbe, that it's built in there. And as we might have overlooked it, it looks like the king is there to receive everyone happily, but the first part of the mashal, in fact, is that you have to go out to the field to receive the king. So that part of the mashal where you actually go out and take and start an avodah towards him to receive him, that's the avodah of, so to speak, accepting the king upon yourself. That's the idea of Kabbalah Soul, choosing a king, the avodah from below to above, which is associated with essentially Kabbalah Soul, receiving the yoke of heaven. So the idea of Kabbalah Soul is that ultimately, when you receive a king upon you, the real reason that we have the mitzvah of placing a king is so that it should be a maso alecha, that his fear should be upon you. And we said that not necessarily is having Kabbalah Soul, right, discipline and receiving the yoke of heaven correspond automatically with having fear of God. They're both like in a similar department, but the truth is you could do the mitzvahs out of rote and out of like strict discipline and not necessarily experience emotionally a fear of God attached to it. But that means that your avodah is not complete. In other words, by your Kabbalah Soul is lacking in its shleimus, its completion, unless it's also attached with some level of fear. And that's where the blowing of the shofar comes in Elul. In other words, despite the fact that in general Elul is a time where we're going to approach the king and place Hashem's kingship upon us, but to blow the shofar adds the additional level that it should be done with a concept of trepidation and fear, so that it can be done properly and completely. So that's why we blow the shofar in addition to just going out into the field. And that explains basically altogether why the notion of fear is built into Elul. It's found in the mashal. It goes along with the Shulchan Aruch. And now we really have to explain what's the concept of love in the month of Elul. Okay, so that was yesterday's class, more or less. Going on, everyone has, I see not everyone, hardly anyone has their copies. You know where the copies are they gave you yesterday? Okay, you have them somewhere. Okay, so Gimel, you didn't get one?
Share with me.
It was with me yesterday.
Oh, right. Okay. Gimel. It says, Bira Inyan, the Pratius Yosef. So to explain in more detail, Yuvan Alpi Mashkusu Tzemach Tzedek, we can understand in accordance with what the Tzemach Tzedek said, third Rebbe of Chabad, the Maimer in his Maimer Shemavar Inyan Tekiya Shofar Rosh Chodesh Elul, where he has a Maimer where he explains. It's Imitaka Shofar Be'ir, the same pasuk that we explained that comes from the Torah. If you blow the shofar in the city, it says that the people won't be afraid. So he has a whole Maimer that's a Tzedek based on this pasuk about blowing the shofar on Rosh Chodesh Elul. And he explains this that we blow the shofar in the month of Elul, hu hakdama l'tkiyah shofar Rosh Hashanah. It's a preface, it's an introduction, so to speak, to the blowing of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, to the mitzvah of shofar on Rosh Hashanah. V'achiluk ben tkiyah shofar de Elul, tkiyah shofar de Rosh Hashanah. What's the difference between these two shofar blasts? Shayira v'charada habal de tkiyah shofar de Elul, that the fear and the trepidation that comes through blowing the shofar on Elul, because blowing the shofar always gives fear. That's we learn from the pasuk. Hi yira tata. It's a lower fear. There's two different levels of fear, and the fear of the shofar of Elul is called the lower fear. Whereas the fear that comes from the shofar of Rosh Hashanah is called yira'ila. It's called the higher fear. And this that the sages established to blow the shofar on Rosh Chodesh Elul and all through Elul. Because in order to come to the higher level of fear on Rosh Hashanah, you have to first go through and experience the lower level of fear. Therefore, they established a minhag to blow the shofar in Elul to enable you to actually experience what Rosh Hashanah is supposed to be about. In other words, I don't know how they experience Rosh Hashanah without it. Right? You have to go through the lower level of fear as a rule to get to the higher level of fear. So therefore they placed in sort of a Nesinas Koach that you will experience this fear through the lower, through the shofar of Elul. V'od tam. Okay, so we have to keep these reasons straight. Tzemach Tzedek's Maimer we're now explaining, right? And we're saying, what's the story with the shofar of Elul? It's the Indian of Yira Tata, the lower fear, which enables you to experience the higher fear of Rosh Hashanah. That's reason number one in the Maimer of Tzemach Tzedek. Od tam. And this reason, the second reason, we're going to get into some questions about. The other reason, another reason why we blow the shofar in Elul, Kodem Rosh Hashanah, which is before the new year, is because B'Seres Yemei Tshuva, in the 10 days of Tshuva, Schil Mi Rosh Hashanah, which begins on Rosh Hashanah, Tzrich Lamshich Mahamakif. You have to draw what's called from the Makif lights. Makif is the light of God, which does not really come into and manifest inside of the consciousness of the world, right? It's basically a light of God which is beyond our perception, which is nonetheless it is here and it's in everything, but it's not perceived by the world. And during the 10 days of Tshuva, we draw down into the world this makif light, in order to fill in all that we've blemished during the days of the year. In other words, what happens is, what do you mean the 10 days of Tshuva, you're returning to God? Because basically, the idea is that when a person does a sin, right, chas v'shalom, or doesn't fulfill a positive mitzvah, then even though Hashem could forgive you, and does forgive you, and this is the whole notion of basically doing tshuva, nonetheless, there is still a sort of aspect of godly service that you were supposed to fulfill. And what does that mean? That you were supposed to bring into a certain place light of God, and you missed your opportunity. Right? Time and space is a limited thing, and every moment that you're alive, the plan is you're supposed to be filling in your time and space with godly functions. So if you miss one or you transgress something and you like skip this place, even though Hashem forgives you and you're not necessarily in trouble, but the aspect of your life of your task here, which you're supposed to complete in that time and space, is past you. So what are you supposed to do? So because this level of the Makif light is beyond time and space, right? So, and therefore, like whether you filled it in or you didn't fill it in, or you did what you're supposed to do, you didn't do what you're supposed to do, that level of godliness is always shining and bright. It like nullifies any boundaries. So if you can access it in some way, you can fill in and replenish like anything essentially that was missing. It's like a very high level of tshuva, which is why we're given the 10 days of tshuva, which have all kinds of special laws associated with them, that even if a person davens by himself, it's like he davened with a minion. We have like superpowers, basically, to connect ourselves with God, because He also wants us to bring and fill in all these gaps. So you have these 10 days of tshuva, whose job it is to draw down this makif light, this light which supersedes time and space, in order to replenish what was lacking in your missed avoda throughout the entire year. And basically, that's why between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, there's 7 days, right? The 10 days of tshuva, 3 of them are Yomim Tovim, are 2 days of Rosh Hashanah and 1 day of Yom Kippur. So the rest is 7 days, which is a complete week, and there's a complete week of tshuva, which each one corresponds to a different day of the week of the entire year. So you're basically able to fill in all the gaps missing from every day of the week throughout the entire year. And that's what that whole thing is for there, amongst other things. But this is, okay, going back to our point, so the 10 days of tshuva are meant to draw down this level of makif in order to fill in these gaps. V'amshachas makif hu al-yidei bittul dafka. How do you draw down the makif? Through self-nullity, right? If you're, so to speak, taking a place, then you're sort of blocking an infinite light from being in that space, because you're in that space. So if you nullify yourself, you leave room for this makif to come. And there's different levels of bittul, different statuses of how much you can nullify yourself. And by being in a state of a high level of bittul, you can draw down and access this makif light. It's explained in Torah Or, is also a sefer by the Alter Rebbe, on the pasuk Hashamayim kisi va'aretz hadom raglai. It says that the heavens, Hashem says that heavens is my throne and the earth is my footstool. Eize bayis, what kind of a house could you build for me? In other words, if basically I don't fit into the world, right? The whole heavens and earth is like my throne. How are you going to build me a house? How can you hold me? What did you say?
This is an easy lounger.
Exactly, it's an easy lounger. So he's trying to say, like, how do you think you can hold me? If like the whole heavens and earth is just like, basically my footstool, what kind of house are you going to build for me? Where can you hold me? I can't be held, seemingly. So he says, he gives us the advice. He says, but this is where I will, so to speak, look and find myself. To a poor person and someone who's broken in spirit. Abid is look. I will gaze. In other words, the Shemayim va'aretz, heavens and earth, hem Torah mitzvahs. Shemayim is Torah, earth is mitzvahs. So it says, Hashem says, right? And the idea of drawing down Hashem through Torah and mitzvahs is called an or panimi. It's an inner light. Why? Because basically the light of godliness, which is vested inside of the Torah mitzvahs, He gives us them to hold on to in this world. In other words, it's like the actual makif light of God doesn't have tefisa, it doesn't have a holding in this world. It's beyond any manifestation that we can access. It's like completely beyond our consciousness. It's not realizable to us. So when Hashem invests Himself into Torah mitzvahs, it's because He wants us to be able to hold on to Him. But what aspect of Him are we by nature holding on to if He's going to invest Himself in something that we can grasp? whether intellectually like the Torah or physically like a mitzvah, is that he minimizes his light into vessels, essentially, which already brings them and gives them a holding in the world, which means that it's in a certain sense connected with the or panimi, the inner light, or mamale kolomim, the light which fills the worlds, and therefore has relevancy inside the worlds. So he says, this is what it means. Torah mitzvahs, an or panimi is an inner, it's like a vessel of inner light. Kisiv hadom raglai. That's what it means. My chair and my footstool, those are like vessels. They're kelim. It's not like the house which is surrounding you. It's something inside the house, right? If we say that the makif light is like the house, right? Which it's the inner light is the stuff you put inside the house, which is his chair and stuff, all his instruments. It was like the objects in the world, right, which are already into the perception of man and sort of realizable. So that's what it's called, the heavens and the earth, or i.e. Torah mitzvahs, things which we can grasp. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah? You have a question on that?
The light that the makif light that surrounds the world, it's not in the world, it's not manifest in the world.
Right. It's in the world, but it's not manifest in the world. In other words, you can't say it's not here, but it's something that's here that we cannot see, touch, feel, or have any real access to, because it's a level of godliness which does not lend itself to be perceived by us. But yeah, go on.
And then there's the molecule almin, which is the energy light that fills the world.
Right, which is what we perceive. So he's saying that since the Torah and mitzvahs are called the heavens and earth, which in general is the worlds, not beyond the worlds, but in the worlds, because the heavens are also worlds, and therefore that's why they're compared to a footstool and a chair, which are like vessels that are within the realm of the grass. The house is kind of like something which is like, sort of represents, we're going to see in a second, like outside of my perception. And you're living in it, within its boundaries. But it's not something that you're sort of holding on to and grasping. You're inside of it, but it's not really inside of you. Whereas the footstool and so forth, it's like it's something you utilize. It's within your own, realm of consciousness. So he says, Birde. Now, by the way, it sounds confusing because usually when we talk about Torah and mitzvahs, we say that inside of the Torah mitzvahs, specifically, you grasp the makif light. Basically, it's the first time we're hearing something like this, that Torah and mitzvahs are called or panimi, right? We talk about or panimi is like the world. Everything else in the world, the objects of the world, is the inner light that fills the world. Whereas the Torah and the mitzvahs, on the contrary, those are like these wondrous implements which can harness the makif light and bring them into the perception of the worlds. Without the Torah mitzvahs, we would just have or panimi. With the Torah mitzvahs, we have like a funnel, a conduit to draw forth the or makif. So it's a little bit of a contradiction, but nonetheless, you can still see that even though it draws down the or makif, it draws it down through implements which are perceivable in the or panimi. In other words, if it was truly or makif with no vessel which gave it a holding in the or panimi, we wouldn't experience it at all. So the whole chiddush of Torah mitzvahs is that Hashem presents something inside of the or panimi which bears inside of it a light which is beyond perception. Nonetheless, it's connected with the or panimi. You understand?
You're saying that the chair and the footstool contain God's light, the king.
Well, we're saying that that's the Torah and the mitzvahs at this point.
The Torah and mitzvahs are the army with the broken spirit.
No, they're not. The Torah and mitzvahs is the footstool. That's what he says. He says the Shemayim is the heavens and the earth is the footstool, right? Which the Rebbe then says is Torah and mitzvahs. And then he says that's called or panimi. And he says, what house are you going to build for me? Which means where are you going to get the makif here? In order to draw down the makifim, which is ezebais tivnuli. What house are you going to build for me? Which is something besides the Torah and mitzvahs, which is like the makif light which precedes the Torah and mitzvahs. How are you going to get that into the world, right? Where does that fit? Because basically it's something which is, that's what Hashem is saying, if the whole heavens and earth is just like where my chair is, where are you going to put the house inside of the heavens and earth that you can hold me, meaning the or makif? Follow me? So it's the heavens. That then he says the poor and the broken of spirit. In other words, if you want to draw down the or makif mamish, then the Torah and the mitzvahs, the heavens and the earth, won't do it for you. You need to be broken of spirit. The bais hu makif, right? So when he says, which house are you going to build for me? Here he says the house represents the level of makif, this true light which is beyond our perception. Because basically it's known that there's 3 levels, something called food, clothing, and house, right? These are like the 3 things you have to give to your wife, right? So the idea, or amongst other things, but the food, clothing, and the house is the idea of 3 levels. Food is inner light, right? And you could say in a certain sense that that's like the objects in the world. Then there's the clothing is a makif, because it goes around your body, you don't ingest it, right? Nonetheless, it's a makif which is very suited to the inner light, because it's tailor-made to fit onto the body. So maybe you could say here, that's what it means, Torah and mitzvahs, right? In other words, that even Torah and mitzvahs are still a makif light, like I was explaining just a second ago. They bear inside of them the makif light, but they're tailor-made to be perceived to some degree inside the world. They like fit right to the scale of the body. Which means that even though they bear the makif light in them, they're found, so to speak, inside of the or panimi. You follow that? No? Whereas, let me just finish the point, I'll go rehearse it. And then, whereas the house is something which bears no, basically, connection to the person. It's like far away from him. So that's called 2 levels of makif. The makif hakarov, the close makif, and the distant makif.
What's the makif called?
The clothes, the garments, right? It's around you, but it's not, you don't internalize it, but it's not far from you. It's like still joined to you.
That's what we're okay.
So what I was saying before about the Torah mitzvahs, the Rebbe doesn't say this here. Maybe you could add, I don't know. But he says that, he's saying that Torah and mitzvahs are called or panimi, right? The inner light which comes into the world. And I'm saying that that's sounding somewhat strange, because in all places we talk about that the Torah and mitzvahs are vessels to receive the makif light. So how does it go together now? So you're saying maybe you could say this is like an intermediate level of makif. It's not the true makif, which is completely beyond comprehension of the world completely and has no place here for us to grasp. But rather it's a makif which, even though it has like a kli in this world, which means it has a presence inside the or panimi, it takes up place here, a mitzvah, Torah. Nonetheless, it's not like all the other objects within creation which are merely worldliness. It's like it's a piece of the world which is like a throwback to something which is completely beyond the world, which is like the makif hakarov, which is like the makif, which even though it's makif, which means it's accessing something which is beyond the inner light of the world, nonetheless it fits tailor-made to the body, which means it's relevant and like can be held in some way by the world. When you move the world, like you move it has tefisa, it can be grasped by the world, like a garment is like held onto. It's not held onto by the body in the same way as food is, that you actually like internalize it, but the world is definitely holding onto it, like a garment, right? Even though it's something which is beyond the world, it's makif, it doesn't come into the body. You follow this? So that's like maybe the intermediate stages with Torah mitzvahs, where you can still call it an or panimi, it has a connection to the makif. But what house can hold me? This level of a makif harachok, the distant makif, which is completely beyond, has anything to do with the world, right? So he says, where's the vessel for that in the world? How can something which is completely beyond? So there he says, who are they bittul? This comes to this level of total self-nullity. That's what it means, ani u'nechei ruach, v'chared al dvari. Someone who is poor and broken of spirit and fears my word. Right? So the state of so that's the point. Like even though you could be doing Torah mitzvahs, if you're not doing them in a state of bittul, you're not accessing really the bais, the external makif level of Hashem.
That's the idea of having a rabbi, no?
So we see
No,
to
because
acquire
it's like some decisions.
It's I don't know if it's yeah, I mean it's nullifying yourself to it says your fear of your rabbi should be like your fear of Shemayim. In other words, only in that it gives you like a realization there's something above you and that you're
we seek to acquire. This is what we seek to acquire, something that we can never perceive. We can't perceive it intellectually, but when we feel it, that we acquire it.
not even as you feel it, like it's a total nullity. You're a total nullity. You're trying to perceive something which upon perceiving it you will lack all perception of self.
Right.
V'lachein tokim b'shofar be'elul. And since we're trying to arrive at this level of bittul, right? Because remember, Okay, hold on. Let me just backtrack because I told you we're going to have to remember the order. We were talking about the mimer from the Tzemach Tzedek, remember? Mm-hmm. And we said that he's trying to explain why we blow the shofar in Elul. And he gave two reasons. The first one we were pretty much happy with. We said that the lower fear, which is connected with the shofar of Elul, leads you to the higher fear of the shofar of Rosh Hashanah. Fine. Then we said that the second reason why we blow the shofar in Elul is because we're trying to draw down the makifim. Because you have to fill in all the light that was lacking throughout the year. And now he's just explained what that really means. He's talking about the makifim is like this level of the bais and this level of total nullity, right? Where you now you can understand a light which is completely beyond the worlds, right? If that light would be present all of a sudden in the worlds, like the worlds are meaningless, literally less than meaningless. They're ayin ve'efes. They're like non-existent whatsoever in the face of this light. So what? Like some little lack or nick that's found in the worlds because of a sin you did. When you draw this light, now you can see more clearly how it just nullifies any problem that would have been there. It's a light which totally overfloods the world and fills all of its gaps. So this is what you're trying to draw down on the 10 days of Tshuva. And then he says all of a sudden, and therefore we blow the shofar in Elul. This is the second reason why we blow the shofar in Elul, according to the Tzemach Tzedek. Because in order for there to be this hamshacha of makifim, of the bayis, of the house, on Rosh Hashanah, you have to be broken in spirit and in the fear of God. And al yidei tkiyas shofar ba'im l'charada, and through blowing the shofar you come to this fear. Who can ask the obvious question? I mean, maybe it's not so obvious, let's face it. But it seems like it's obvious.
Does fear necessitate bittul?
Yeah, the fear is connected with bittul, right? The idea of being broken of spirit. But the question is,
Play the shofar every day.
blow the shofar every day of Elul. That's a question?
No. The question is, you should do it every day.
We do it every day. Okay, so anyway, here's the question. Tzrich lahav, I have to understand.
Every day of the year.
Simple answer. What is he trying to say? We need to create this hamshacha of makif, right? In order to fill in the whole year's blemishes, how do we do it? We need to be in a state of bittul, right? How do we arrive at a state of bittul? Through the shofar. But isn't it true that we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah? Right? What do we need the shofar? And then he tries to explain that that's why you need the shofar of Elul. That's why we blow the shofar in Elul. So that on Rosh Hashanah, we'll be in a state of bittul. But we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Right? And through this blowing of the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, we also come to a state of fear and bittul. On the contrary, we just got through saying that Rosh Hashanah represents this higher level of fear, right? On the Rosh Hashanah, we come, the fear and trepidation is much greater, and therefore the bittul is much greater than the fear of Elul. The canal, and as we said before, Kanis Karleil, as mentioned earlier by Maimer, in our Maimer, Shachadada Haba Mitkiya Shofar de Elul, Hu Yira Tata, that the fear that comes from the Elul shofar is the lower level of fear. V'Achadada Haba Mitkiya Shofar de Rosh Hashanah, whereas the fear that comes from the blowing of the shofar of Rosh Hashanah is Yira Ilah, is the higher level of fear. Nevertheless, according to the Tzemach Tzedek and this whole mimer, this whole explanation, why we blow the shofar in Elul, it's because the hamshacha of the makif on Rosh Hashanah is al yidei hachadad haba mitkiyas shofar de Elul, because we can only get this makif level that's going to fix our world in the 10 days of Tshuva from the tkiyas shofar of the blowing of the shofar of Elul for some reason. We don't have the answer to that. That's the question we're going to be basically trying to uncover for a while, the next class or two. But does everyone understand the question clearly?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Aren't they saying both the same thing right now?
What'd you say?
All explanation from Tzarich La'avin, it's like the same explanation that Tzemach Tzedek gave, like that basically you're blowing the shofar and Elul, from this
No,
like,
Tzrich Lahavin is a question on the Tzemach Tzedek. The Tzemach Tzedek just says a statement.
Yeah.
He says that you need to blow the shofar in Elul in order to elicit
to-
the makif of Rosh Hashanah. The Rebbe is now asking a question on that.
Right.
He's saying that why do you need the shofar of Elul? You have already the shofar of Rosh Hashanah itself to draw down this level of makif, because the shofar is connected with fear. And on the contrary, the fear of Rosh Hashanah is much greater and more awe-inspiring and gives more bittul than the fear of Elul.
Okay.
So that should be enough. You don't need a shofar in Elul, seemingly.
Okay, but-
Nevertheless, the Tzemach Tzedek says, specifically through the shofar in Elul, that's how you draw down this level of makif of Rosh Hashanah, the 10 days of Tshuva. And it's not understood.
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
That's
that-
right.
No. I'm saying it doesn't make a lot of sense to only do on Rosh Hashanah. Because
Why?
Because if it's so big, you need something to like bring you to that stage. You suddenly like just jump into the stage of like complete bittul in 2 days. It's like,
Hold on a second. I hear what you're saying, but there's no mention of the shofar of Rosh Hashanah as far as the Tzemach Tzedek is concerned. He says in order to draw down the hamshacha of the makif of the 10 days of Tshuva, this is accomplished through, and he said like simply through the shofar of Elul. What's the connection?
Yeah.
Okay, I need a preparation, fine, but
Makif is
don't
getting
tell me that the makif is drawn down from the shofar of Elul. The makif is drawn down from the shofar of Rosh Hashanah, you should say. Just the shofar of Elul gets me like ready for that. That's not what it says.
Yeah, it
it
says
says the
the makif
makif is
is
drawn
after.
down from the shofar of Elul. That's why you blow the shofar.
Okay.
It's a causal to get very close.
Yeah, but he's saying it's a makif. Makif is the end point. Like you're not going to get bigger than the makif. That's
Sure, but you have to get there.
I know, but the whole point is he's saying in Elul you're blowing the shofar.
That gets you there.
Makif, that gets you there. So
Right.
why?
It's more than seemingly just a preparation.
It
It's
is.
the thing itself. It draws down the makif. And seemingly it should be the shofar of Rosh Hashanah. Maybe you could say, like the first answer he said was that the shofar of Elul is connected with the lower fear. And that prepares you for the higher fear. Fine, that we were okay with. They didn't have a question about that. When it comes to the saying that that is what draws down your hamshachas of the 10 days of Tshuva, without any mention to the shofar of Rosh Hashanah, that's the problem.
Just say it.
Perhaps just like on the blowing the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, will make it such that all the kind of satans trying to block the prayers, or all the evil forces trying to block the good prayers to coming through into the castle.
So it's like a decoy, you're saying, or something.
Yes, like a
Okay.
decoy. No, but
Yeah.
just like that for the higher levels, and the lower levels, which is the blowing the shofar all month long, is kind of like the protecting or like a decoy of the journey from the desert to at least greeting the king in the field, and part of the journey to the castle.
I think you gotta jot these ideas down. It's not bad.
No,
All right, but it's not okay. Let's go on. It's too much to even respond to that. Basically, it's a whole mimer in itself. Okay, Dalid. Yuvan zeh behekdim. It's nice though. I like
I
that.
think.
Yuvan zeh behekdim. He says, to understand this, we have to first preface. Isn't that always the way it goes? Habir b'zeh sha'yira de Elul hu yira tata v'yira de Rosh Hashanah hi yira ilah. So to first understand this question that we have, let's look more into the notion that Elul is the lower fear and Rosh Hashanah is the higher fear, because in that will lie the key. Tehine achiluk ben yira tata v'yira ilah. The difference between the lower and the higher fear, who kamavur b'Tanya, is as it's explained in Tanya, who bekam makom was in many places. The yira tata hi megadluso yizbarach bebrias v'yishavus ha'olmos. That the lower fear stems from the greatness of Hashem in that He created and brought into existence the worlds. You want to say something?
No. I'm just connecting.
The fact that Hashem made the world, and you look around the world in a state of mamish awe, meditation of this thing, right? Of this creation, which is totally mind-boggling in every way. It's perfection. It's inconsistencies. It's everything about creation, and that's basically what we do in Psuki de Zimra, right? We just sit there and like talk about the creation a lot, and just meditate about how Hashem made this thing, right? In davening, and this brings you to what's called yira tata, the lower level of fear. The bittul should be yira zu, he bittul hayesh, and the bittul that you can come to from this type of meditation and from this type of fear is called bittul hayesh. This is a very, very, very fundamental concept in Chassidus. We're going to talk now about the difference between bittul hayesh to that of what's called bittul b'metzias, bittul hametzias. The difference is the word yesh and metzias are kind of alike in a certain sense. They both mean like to be, but there's a different state of being, right? Bittul hayesh means that you feel that you exist, right? But you take your feeling of existence, which doesn't ever leave you, and you remove it from your interests to God's interests. You're still the whole time experiencing yourself as an existence. So bittul hayesh means that you take your yeshis, in other words, your interests, and you avert them from what you're interested in into what Hashem is interested in. So you never stop existing or feeling your own existence. On the contrary, you're very much aware of your own existence, but your existence is all towards Hashem. That you do His mitzvahs, and you're interested in what He loves and what He fears, so to speak, His love and fear, and you're a good boy. That type of fear of God and nullity towards Hashem is born out of meditation. You can arrive there by thinking deeply. When a person will start to consider that they're being at every moment enlivened by Hashem, and therefore, like, what are they going to do? Like, go and go against the will of God? Like, when they realize that their whole lives are created yesh ma'ayin, every second of their existence is being produced by the Creator, and there's really no real substance to their creation so much, other than that Hashem is out of His kindness is allowing them to be. And there, He also gave us commandments and has a certain interest and design for us. Like, all of a sudden, you're going to like go against Him. A little bit of contemplation in the matter, you will nullify your whole interest to His interest in total admiration and appreciation and nullity towards what His kindness that He's doing to you, right? And you'll just do what He wants you to do as opposed to what you want to do. And this again comes from meditation about Hashem's creation of the world. When you think about the creation and what it's really made of, then it leads you to this kind of meditation that you'll do what He says. That's called bittul hayesh. Yira ilah hi megadluso v'romamuso yisbarach shelamayla me'olmus. The higher level of fear comes from an aspect of godliness that you're meditating on, which is God's greatness, which is totally removed from the worlds. And not only is He great because He creates the worlds, but He's great because creating the worlds to Him is nothing. But there's the level of godliness in all the worlds and the infinite heavens and earth. When you start to meditate on how great they are and how vast they are and so forth, all of that is like a drop in the ocean and less, and like literally non-existent, and something Hashem doesn't even have to put His mind on, and there's like this infinite well of godliness which is totally beyond creation altogether. And you start to meditate on this fact that as far as Hashem is concerned, the world don't even exist at that level of the light. He hasn't yet even like sort of contracted Himself and summoned this level of godliness which is there for the sake of creation, and from this like the point of godliness He'll bring forth all of heavens and earth. He hasn't brought forth that point yet. There's an aspect of godly life where He just hasn't conceived that thought, in which case where is He? It's totally beyond creation. Creation at that point is a nullity. So therefore, when you think about this level of godliness, which is beyond the worlds completely, the kula kamek lochashi, that everything before Him is as nothing. Not how great the worlds are, and nonetheless He's enlivening every being, but everything in the world is zero and doesn't exist in comparison to what's beyond this level of light. That the bittul that you are able to summon from this type of meditation, chashiv considered, kalo chashiv is considered as nothing, or is not considered. That the bittul that you get from this type of fear is called bittul metzias, which means you are no longer in existence. If you are able to basically have this realization come upon you, and I say come upon you because it's something that you can't really work to get, right? The work and the meditation you can do is to realize the awesomeness of God inside the worlds. For the godliness which is beyond the worlds to be perceived by you, it has to sort of be a gift that comes from Him upon you, right? That there's a level of godly light which is beyond the world, which is beyond your creation entirely. It could like sort of flood over you and enter into you through work that you do, but not as like a measure for measure of the work you do. It's sort of like you do as much work as you can, and then if Hashem wants, He grants you a gift on top of that, where you can perceive a level of godly light which is beyond creation. So what happens to you when you're busy perceiving a level of godly light which is beyond creation? There's no creation. So your state of knowledge towards Hashem is bearing a level of godly light where you don't exist in it. Therefore, it's not just that you decide you're going to take your interests and turn them to God's interests. You are a non-entity in the face of that light. And that's called bitul mitzias. Your whole mitzias, your whole existence is nullified. Because in fact, you've like accessed with your thoughts or whatever, an aspect of godliness where there's no world, there's no creation. You're part of the creation, buddy. Right? So when you come to a realization where there is no creation, you cease to exist. And that's a level of bittul which is like kind of like Moshe Rabbeinu style. You know what I'm saying? You are no longer a being. You don't experience yourself. Moshe says, "V'nasati esev b'satecha." We've mentioned this several times in the last week because it's in our parshas. I will give you the grass in your field. How can Moshe Rabbeinu say, "I'm going to give you the grass in your field"? Because there's no Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem speaks through him. He is a nullity of existence complete. There is no self. Not that there's a self and I'll do everything Hashem tells me because I'm a good boy, because I no longer have self-interest, I only have God's interests, but you are the one having God's interests. There's still a you. When you access this level of complete nullity, there is no more you, no more identity whatsoever. And this is the higher level of fear, the higher level of bittul. So just a couple more minutes, there's a mashal for this that the previous Rebbe brings, which I think we have the idea of more or less, but just interesting mashal that he brings is the idea of a simple person versus a regular chacham, a wise person, versus a chacham gadol, a great wise person, like a Rebbe, something like beyond comprehension, Shlomo HaMelech, right? And it says the difference of approach of these two people towards the chacham hagadol is very interesting. The simple person, when he approaches the chacham, the great wise chacham, right, his experience is that he says like, wow, look at this, this is incredible. Everything I'm doing is like nothing compared to this. I'm going to go and I'm going to, cling on to this person and be his devout follower, right? I've had enough of like my silly life of being a simple person. I'm going to cling on to this person. But what is the feeling that he has having done that? He looks at himself versus all the other simple people that have not taken this route in their life. They haven't found the Chacham HaGadol. And he says like, I found the Chacham HaGadol, right? I'm going to connect myself to this person and I am like a completely new individual. I'm wonderful because I have now found the light and I'm attaching myself to something much higher. So his existence is very much pronounced in his own eyes. Right? The fact that he's nullified himself from his silliness and he's now doing everything the Chacham HaGadol says, he's nullified his yesh, right? But he has not nullified his being. On the contrary, he's actually strengthened his perception of self. He's very, very much sure that he exists. He's now like a godly being.
It's also strengthened his yesh, no?
Yeah, it strengthens the yesh. Exactly, but it's yesh of kedusha.
It's a high yesh,
okay. Whereas the chacham, the regular chacham, when he comes across this person, he already has some value to his life. He knows what chachma is, right? The other person doesn't know what chachma is. So we see this guy just like, wow, that's good. But the chacham, the regular chacham, he knows what chachma is. And he already is wise, and he understands things, and he's very deep. When he comes across this person, and he realizes that everything he understands, he doesn't understand it. What he thought was something, he realizes is nothing, because the Chacham HaGadol doesn't consider the Chacham of the regular person as Chachma at all. It's like, he's talking about 2 plus 2 and not even that. His whole understanding of himself that he had before, when he compares it to this very wise man, he realized that it's not wisdom at all. So his whole being, when he approaches this wise man, is turned into nothing. He realized that everything he has doesn't exist. It's a meaningless nullity of existence before this higher existence. And this is the idea of bittul matzias. What happens to him? He doesn't get more excited about what he is. He realizes that he is a nullity and has nothing whatsoever. So these are the two basic levels. You had a question?
Yeah. We're talking about how the mitzvah mitzvot is like it's like a higher level, but I feel like the other one would be a higher level because Hashem wants us to be in this world to still be connected. So thinking about our existence as if we don't exist, it seems like it's not. It seems like it's not like what Hashem put us here for.
I like it. We'll get to that tomorrow.